Hello and welcome to Barry's Economics. Today I'm going to be talking about a lovely, lovely lie that we've all been told, and that lie is everyone can win. Growth, growth, growth. You hear it everywhere, don't you? There's such an obsession in politics right now because we're coming up to the 2025 budget. And if you look at what Labour has been saying for the last kind of year in government, it's an obsessive talk about growth, growth, growth.
The Prime Minister and I have said loud and clear, economic growth is the #1 mission of this government.
And so we discussed at Cabinet and have started the work on driving growth.
This time last year,
let's talk about
it
growth.
was all about growth.
What I will say is that growth is the #1 priority of this government. Economic growth, wealth creation, making sure that people are better off.
They're obsessed, aren't they? Just growth. It feels like that's all their lives contain. It's like to the point where they're so obsessive, you're like, oh, well, what would you like with your coffee? Oh, could I have some growth with it? Oh, I'd love some growth with it. Like, oh, what are you doing tonight? I'm just sitting at home dreaming of growth. Sounds a little bit too seedy, really. And we hear it everywhere, especially when a wealth tax comes up. People say, don't demonise wealth.
I'm really sick of wealth being a dirty word in this country.
Wealth creation is what it's about. It's everything. We've got to grow. Wealth is not a zero-sum game, Barry. And all my life, it feels like I've heard that phrase, zero-sum game. Wealth isn't a zero-sum game.
That wealth isn't a finite pie. It's not a zero-sum game.
So it's government's job to divide up the slices of the pie versus having a society that grows the pie.
A society that grows the pie. What a concept. And in fact, that's how it works in a free society, because it's not a zero-sum game.
But I've never really felt confident enough, and I still, in a part of me, doesn't feel confident enough when I hear it to push back. But actually, the concept is very simple, and I'm going to outline it right now, because actually, once you grasp the central concept of it, you realize that a lot of people that are talking about zero-sum don't know what the they're talking about. Zero-sum is like slicing a pie. If my slice gets bigger, yours gets smaller. Now, you can slice this pie 100 ways, but however you slice it, the amount of pie available is fixed. That's a fixed sum pie. If I have more, you have less. Or to put it another way, the amount I have is an amount that you don't have, okay? But people who say that wealth isn't a zero-sum game, they're saying something different. They're not talking slicing up a physical pie. Non-zero sum means baking a bigger pie or more pies. The idea is that unlike one single fixed pie, if we innovate, create new products, trade with each other, we can all grow the pie. So everyone gets more pie. Pie for everyone. That's a phrase that you actually hear people say, grow the pie. As if anyone's ever grown a pie. Who's growing pies? Because in the real world, we know that if pies grew, we'd all be pie millionaires, and my nan wouldn't bake obsessively. But growing the pie is what a lot of rich people, well-off people say just before they eat your slice. And part of that is because it makes them feel better. It's something very reassuring about going, yes, I'm taking all of this pie now. I'm taking 95% of this pie now, but we just got to grow the pie. It's not, you know, like, yes, you only get 5%, but there's more pie, it's coming, it's on the way. Just don't touch my pie. This is my pie. Grow your own pie. Pie thief. Okay? Stop complaining, start baking, and everyone wins. Which is a lovely, lovely idea, isn't it? Such a lovely, reassuring idea. The only problem is, it's just that, an idea. Because that argument commits what philosophers call a category error. That's a category error. It takes something that's true in one domain, wealth creation, and pretends it's true in another domain, wealth application. People who say wealth isn't zero-sum are correct, but only up to a point. Because yes, innovation is real, productivity is real, new wealth can be created, but only up to a finite point. Because the resources that make that wealth, the lithium, the land, the houses, the bandwidth, the algorithm that decides whose voice gets heard, all of those are finite in the real world. Because if one person buys more lithium, somebody else will have less lithium to buy. If one person with their wealth buys 1 million houses, 1 million people don't have a house. Or as we call it in London, the rental market. So it's the flour needed to bake that bigger pie is finite. You just can't always bake bigger pie. And that is the definition of zero sum. Finite resources. And it is dangerous to confuse the two. So the category error actually works for the pie analogy, because zero sum is a real pie in the real world. Non-zero sum is a magically growing fairy tale pie, because in the real world, pies don't grow. Now you might say, hang on Barry, but growth is real, right? Economies have grown throughout the 18th and 19th century, so purely a pie can grow, right? It's grown in the past, so surely there is a magically growing pie. Now, that confusion is almost understandable because of the last 2 centuries of growth from the Industrial Revolution onwards. But to continue on our analogy, in the 18th and 19th century, we were able to mill more flour because we were invading countries or seeing new terrains where we could plant new crops. The 18th and 19th century felt like infinite resources made sense. There were still frontiers left to plunder, oil in the ground, forests to fell, oceans that seemed infinite and that were unexplored. So you could make, sell, burn and build, and it didn't feel like you were taking from anyone. It felt like you were just magically growing the pie. You were just creating wealth. The world looked endless. The ledger looked infinite. But here's the problem. In 2025, we live on a globalized world, in a closed system, one planet with boundaries, spreadsheets that now reach to the edge of our atmosphere. The economist Kenneth Boulding called this the shift from the cowboy economy, the frontier economy, to Spaceship Earth economy. Because back in the 1900s, the cowboy would ride out endlessly exploring out into new land, new frontiers. But today, on Spaceship Earth, we've got nowhere new to grow into or expand into. So, and this is the part to remember, is that when someone says wealth isn't zero sum, they're confusing 2 categories. Wealth creation in numbers and spreadsheets. And numbers and spreadsheets can be infinite. Like, you can literally grow numbers infinitely. That's the thing about numbers. Everyone can have £1 billion. But in the real world, only one person can own the physical bank. There are finite resources. So while wealth creation is infinite, real world resources and assets are finite. So what you can buy with your wealth that's created is finite. And when they say that, they are confusing the Wild West that our grandparents grew up in with finite Spaceship Earth. And on a spaceship, you can't burn the walls for heat. That's right, Elon. You can't just pivot to Mars. You can't hoard the oxygen and call it your own personal success. We are all on board, breathing the same air, floating through the infinite darkness of space on a massive, round, beautiful spaceship. And the only question to ask is, do we learn to share, or do we run out of air pretending we don't need to share it? We are moving from a growth economy to a distribution or contribution economy. Think less yeehaw and more a 7-way birthday dinner where everyone's ordered different things and now we have to share the bill. We are still talking like cowboys. All right, partner, I ain't paying for roads. I've got a horse, you pay for roads because I've got a massive $1 billion horse. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep pretending the whole world is infinite and I can just take as much as I like and it's all mine. You create your own wealth. Yes, okay, I have bought up all the resources and all the houses to ride my horse around in. Okay, maybe this metaphor has gone a little bit far, and you're also wondering, why is this cowboy from Dorset? And you'd be right to wonder that, but don't think too hard about it. Just remember, zero sum on what it means. So when you watch the budget and you hear about growth, 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 and how important growth is, and we need to stimulate the economy, and it's all about growth, remember that they're pretty much preaching from a hymn book from the 1950s, and that there's a limit to how much we can grow. Sure, we can stimulate the economy, AI might help, but really, we live in a finite resources world. And that when somebody says you can just grow, 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 that is no longer anywhere near as true as it used to be. And it certainly is becoming less and less true by the day. So hopefully that perspective helps. And you can also read a little bit more or see a couple of videos that I made. There's, if you look at why we tax poor rather than rich on this video, you can see the kind of biases that come into policy making around the budgets. And you can also see status quo bias, because a big part of the reason why the taxes remain the same and that people do the same thing, talking about like a frontier economy or the idea of growth, is really about status quo bias and the fact that actually making a change is risky. So thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you again.